Well, Don, you'd think after 50 years, 53 years and longer than that, to get the Civil Rights Act passed, to eliminate colored only restaurants, cars, buses, now California and Connecticut want to go to all black dorms. This is Dan Perkins.
You know, Hillary Clinton, she threw the kitchen sink at Donald Trump, and you know what? He's still standing. This is Don Mazzella.
It's time. Two guys from Verona. Each week, you will hear from Dan Perkins, a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, and best-selling author, and Don Mazzella, a veteran journalist, author, and radio host, talking about things that concern you politically, financially, and socially. They will also try to give listeners a heads up on future happenings.
Well, Don, the University of California system, including Fullerton, Los Angeles, and Berkeley, have announced that they are going to make segregation of blacks an opportunity. And also the University of Connecticut, another state school, is also going to be offering segregation of black students. What in the hell happened? All the blood, sweat, and tears and the beatings and everything that black people took to try and get to the Civil Rights Act of 63 and Voting Rights Act of 64, to try and get equal treatment, to eliminate segregated housing, segregated schools, segregated water fountains, restaurants, buses, taxis, and towns. Black people are now saying they want to be segregated away from everybody else. I just don't understand. I'm working on a commentary piece, which has the working title, What would Martin Luther King Jr. say to his brothers and sisters today if they were talking about going back to segregating? We have a country that supposedly was built on the ability of minorities to come in from all over the world and assimilate into our American culture. And I began to think about this is insane is the only word I can come up with, Don. I think about the idea that Lester Maddox. Remember Lester Maddox?
Oh, he of the axe wielding, yes, mayor of Atlanta.
Yeah, trying to keep the schools segregated. All of that stuff that we went through in the 60s, late 50s and early 60s. Dr. Martin Luther King's speech at the Lincoln Memorial, his "I Have a Dream" speech. I went back and read that speech again over the weekend, Don, and I read it after I watched the replay of Mr. Trump at the black church in Detroit, and thought about his discussion about black people in inner city, and that caused me to go back and read Martin Luther King's speech. It's not a long speech, easy read, and I looked at it and I said, "My God, this is what Trump is talking about," except it was 53 years ago. Now, there's no question that there have been some people, some black people, who have left the black community, the inner city, and have gone on to success. Thousands, if not millions of people, black people, have been successful over the last 50 years. They've lifted themselves up out of the poverty of the inner city and gone on to achieve great things in everything, in science and history and military and politics and everything else. So it just seems so strange to me that we'd have the black students in Fullerton and L.A. and Berkeley wanting to be segregated. And I wondered, Don, I thought about this a lot. I wondered, those students who succeeded in inner city schools to be able to go to college, I wonder if I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, but I wonder if the reason why they want to segregate is they were in a segregated society all of their life. If you live in the inner city of Detroit or Chicago or New York or whatever major city in the country, those areas that contain the black population, the majority of the black population in an area, are in essence segregated. They are where they want to be. At least they're where they are right now. Maybe they don't want to necessarily be there, but they've been there. And we talked about, as I wrote a piece on the war on poverty, and I think you used the piece of information that said that there are now been close to 7 generations who have been living in this country under the war on poverty, and there's no question that the war on poverty destroyed the black family, took the man out of the household and his responsibilities, and turned that responsibility for survival, food, and shelter to the central government, not from the man who fathered the children. But I'm just wondering if the reason why these black communities want to have segregated colleges on these state campuses is because they don't want to assimilate. They want to stay within their own structure. And I'm wondering about that from the standpoint of the Muslims that are immigrating into this country today, much like the Irish and the Germans and everybody else, the Italians who came in during their period, formed their own little communities, but they also began to learn the language, the laws, the rules, so that they could assimilate into American culture. But I'm wondering if the black community, and even more so, the Arab community and the Muslim community doesn't want to assimilate, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the black students were demanding segregation. It's so abhorrent to me that black people would want to be segregated, and that the institutions of these 4 colleges that we know of, there could be more that we don't know about yet, would take that segregation issue and turn it around, not to be a negative, but to try and be a positive to support the black community by segregating the black community in and of itself away from the rest of the, quote, multiculturalism that's supposed to be part of our great American society. I just thought, wow, where have we come from? And why did we go through all that pain and suffering and $22 trillion to 53 years later say, no, I think we'd like to be segregated again? I'm sure there are probably some white people in this country who gladly want to segregate them, but I don't think they're a majority. They're not even a minority. They're a fraction of a percent. But what message does it send to the rest of us as a nation that the black community is willing to give up their civil rights to go into non-integrated but segregated in their educational experience? Don?
Well, for one thing, the rationale these colleges are using is it's giving the black students a safe area in which they can live and work, as if you can forever hold people into safe areas, whether on campus or other places. That's the most ridiculous thing. But you know, there's an old saying, it is a shame the youth is wasted on the young, because they don't really understand. And for them to demand it, and we have stupid, and that's the word I have to use, stupid academics who seem to think they have to bend over backwards, for your favorite expression, political correctness, and not understand that life is, to quote Jimmy Carter, unfair, and that we all have to go through life sometimes finding out untruths about ourselves, our families, our religions, about everything else. It's an interesting thing. I've been checking around, and these colleges all made this announcement together, and I'm told by someone who's checking on it that this was a coordinated announcement so that not one college was attacked before the other ones could do it. It's something that is going to play out in the coming days, and I think, Dan, you're to be congratulated for bringing it up. I know you're upset about it, but you know, every one of these things are like a little drip that make it easier for Donald Trump to be successful in November. Back to you.
Well, you know, you used an interesting word in describing why they're doing this, and you used the word safe, that they want to keep the black students safe. Well, do we know that there is an escalation of crime against black people on college campuses across the nation? Or
just the opposite?
Yeah, I would think so. And is it part of this mentality that seems to be going around in the campuses that there are areas where you can't talk, there are areas where you can't attack another person's idea, they don't have to defend their ideas, that we have created a college environment that is controlled by eliminating free speech, by eliminating the freedom of expression, by eliminating the uniqueness of the human personality, by trying to homogenize them all into one place. And the college experience is no longer what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, when people learned and grew both personally and emotionally by being in a multicultural environment where they saw people of different races and religions and creeds, and learned to assimilate into that culture, that college culture, and build relationships with people, and grow and develop as human beings. I really think it's a regression, Don. We're going the wrong direction. And what's wrong with
wholeheartedly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. We've been going in the wrong direction for years. And college was supposed to be a place of exposing people to ideas. It no longer is the case. It's a place where kids go to get a ticket punched and some idea for getting a job. It's a tough time, and I'd hate to be on a college campus today.
So, how do you think this plays out, Don?
I believe that one of two things will happen. There'll be such a groundswell against it that they will quickly reverse themselves, or if it's more likely it's accepted, it's just another step. The next step is Asian students will ask for an Asian dorm. Puerto Rican students will ask for a Puerto Rican, Hispanic dorm. Where does it all end? It's ironic that if whites asked for a whites only dorm, they'd say they were discriminating and being fascists. It's funny. I'd like somebody should come out and say a white only dormitory. See what they say. It's safe for whites.
Who's going to, in the black community, who's going to protest this? Is it going to be the Black Lives Matter or the Black Panthers or any of those radical groups?
No, it's got to be the black professors on campus who are seeing themselves further radicalized. As I told you earlier, I was not aware of this, but in checking around on the story today, there's actually been segregation in course taking, segregation in where students sit, students do teamwork, etc. In fact, just a few minutes ago, I heard from someone who said at one of the nation's elite colleges, a professor was censored because she organized teams by the old Lombardi way, which was A-B, and went down the alphabetic list and just said A, it was an A, B is with B, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And because some of the students turned out to be blacks and whites, they complained and said they weren't helping.
Yeah.
It's a sad world we're in.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we hit a break about now?
Yeah, we need to take a break. This is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
And we're the Two Guys from Verona. Go to our website, twoguysfromverona.com, and tell us what you think. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, you know, Dan, it's the day after Labor Day, and I heard several commentators say today that now the American people will start to pay attention to the presidential campaign. I think they are already, and they have been. But the thing I want to talk about is that, as you predicted, Hillary Clinton threw everything but the kitchen sink at Donald Trump. If you should see the commercials that I saw on the various programs, TV programs, etc., she made him out to be everything from a clown to a buffoon to a demagogue, everything that she could. But the end result was the first CNN poll today had him 2 points up. Now naturally, the media made the caveat, but of course she's winning all the battleground states, which, by the way, I don't believe is in fact the case, because some of the things, for instance, here in New Jersey, where everybody says he's a shoo-in, I was talking to a Democratic operative, I guess it was Sunday, and he said he's getting real resistance from his people about Hillary Clinton. People simply do not like her. You know, it may get her to the White House, but it's going to be a littered path getting there. Today, in the Daily in the Bergen Record, which is very much a pro-Hillary paper, the political cartoon was her asleep in a bed, and the faucet dripping with the words "emails" underneath. Unfortunately for her, it's an issue that's not going to go away. It shouldn't go away. We have all sorts of problems. We had a guest on a Jiggy show earlier who said that Bill Clinton received millions of dollars for being head of a group of schools, which included ITT, which was just told by the government to stop giving classes or enrolling students. It's all bad, bad, bad. If it weren't for the media propping her up, as they did yesterday, with her on the flight giving her softball answers, and then turning right around and then giving hard answers to Donald Trump, you wonder sometimes where these reporters are. Now, to me, another straw in the wind, and I'm going to stop and let you give your comments after this. Another straw in the wind is that the number of candidates fielded by the Democrats in the lower level has turned out to be very poor, according to several groups that assess candidates. We're going to see that report up in the next couple of days. Now I'll go back to you, Dan.
Well, we just got a few minutes. You know, I had said on this program in July that I felt that if Mr. Trump could weather the storm that was coming at him, the vicious attack that Hillary was going to launch, because she said after the Democratic convention that she was going to use her husband's approach when he attacked Bush 41, that she was going to spend the entire month of August attacking his character and his ability to be president, so that the election would be over by Labor Day. And I said that if Mr. Trump hangs in there, and if he's close to her, even slightly ahead by Labor Day, he has accomplished one thing. And the latest number that I saw was that she spent $100+ million in advertising in the battleground states in the month of August, and she didn't really make any progress. In fact, she's off from her post-election high. She gave all that back and then some.
Can I interrupt you there?
Sure, go right ahead.
Wisconsin's a good example of that. She had a 14-point lead in Wisconsin. It's now down to 4 in Wisconsin alone. And that's one state she thought she would win easily.
Right. Well, I think that there is a problem here, and that is that, as you pointed out in some of our other discussions, she's decided that she's going to win, and there are news people who are saying that she's basically trying to coast to the election, that she's keeping a very low profile because she thinks she's already got it locked up, and they talk about how little Mr. Trump has spent. I think that what we're seeing here is a continuation, in some respects, of what happened in the Republican primaries. I could be wrong on this number, but I think it's right. Jeb Bush spent $120 million in primaries, in promotion in primaries, to get the nomination, and he did. I don't know, what did he get? 6 or 9 delegates, something like that. But Trump spent the least amount of money of all the candidates, and yet got the most votes because he learned to use social. He's learned to use social media to communicate, and because of the nature of his personality and who he is, the amount of free advertising that he's getting by being on all these shows, because of the news that he's making, has created a situation where he's getting stuff that she has to pay for, but she doesn't have anything of real substance to say, and as a result, that's why I think he's actually up, and we're probably going to see, as you said, more polls where he's up. And with that, we need to take a break. I'm Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
And remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, the president did not have a really good Labor Day. I'm not sure he got a chance to play golf, but maybe he did. There was some talk he was going to California, but he didn't because he was on his Asian part of his farewell tour. Started in China, and there was the G20 conference, and that kind of went in the tank. The president arrived at the airport, no red carpet, no ladder to come down, and nobody from China to meet him at the airport. A little bit of a snub there. Then his staff got into an altercation with the Chinese security people, and then he goes into the summit, and the president or prime minister, whatever he's called in the Philippines, really went after him, and he canceled his trip to the Philippines because they didn't want him there. And he was supposedly going to sign this great global warming pact at the G20 summit, but it didn't get negotiated finally with the Chinese. So then he comes back, and today the administration notifies Congress that, well, we kind of made a mistake. Instead of that $400 million we told you that wasn't ransom, we actually didn't pay him $400 million. We paid him $1.7 billion. $1.7 billion. But it wasn't ransom. So here we have the president, and I was asking at the break, I wonder who is the teacher in the school of lying. And you quickly pointed out, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. But, I think Hillary's probably a more diverse liar. She lies about a lot more things than Obama does, at least from what I can tell. And here we have her State Department helping, when she was there, negotiate this deal that ultimately went to $400 million that turns out to be $1.7 billion. At least what they've told us so far, it was $1.7 billion. So the president didn't have a good week. Hillary's had a little problem with her cough. They were talking about it being some pollen in the air. And Donald Trump has a great weekend at the black church, to the point that CNN decides they want to try and pull the plug because he's doing too well. And I look at that and say, wow, what in the world is going on? We got blacks who want to be segregated, and now we've got blacks who are warming up to Donald Trump, and CNN, probably the Clinton News Network, has got to stop him, and yet he seems to be continuing to do well. Don?
Well, three things. One is the reason the State Department made that revelation was that a reporter had glommed onto the story and was about to break it. I told you that earlier, and it's been confirmed. And by the way, it wasn't CNN that cut the feed. What happened was they had a television feed from inside the Trump church, and it was from Reuters. And at the point where the pastor of the church was giving Trump a Bible, a shawl, and a kiss, the Reuters producer said to cut the feed. And the cameraman who was inside the church said, I won't do it. Even if it costs me my job, I won't do it. And so the nation was treated to Donald Trump being hugged by a black minister. Imagine that. Well, the cameraman's gotten at least 6 offers to date from other people because they feel he's going to lose his job. The news media has another black eye. At times I'm ashamed to say I'm a member of it, because some of the great rules that we learned, and I learned, are going out the window in this campaign, and I'm afraid we're going to see more of it later on. Back to you.
Let me ask you a quick question, because I didn't go to journalism school, and you did. I'm curious as to what did they teach? And I know you're working with Columbia University too today. What are they teaching today about honesty, integrity, and accuracy?
I wish I could answer that question, Dan. In my classes, I teach them an old-fashioned one, which is you get the facts, you write them out, and you let the reader decide. But however, I'm told, and I've talked to people in the industry, the real thing now is to pander to the preferences of your readers. You can see it in the Daily News and the New York Post. It's ironic. The two have switched positions. The New York Post, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, used to be known as the liberal paper. In fact, they had a standing headline that read, "Cold Wave hit city, Jews and blacks suffer most." But now it is the most conservative of all newspapers. Then you have the Daily News that calls Trump a buffoon and devotes his pages to it. It's a very interesting, and in fact did not have a single line of copy about Trump's visit to a black church in either its Saturday, Sunday, or Monday editions. Not a single line.
You said that was the
Daily News.
And what about the prestigious beacon of all, the New York Times?
Well, the Times covered it, but as did the networks. All they covered was the outside protests, not the inside events, not the warm feeling in the church, which if that had been Hillary Clinton, you would have heard love gushing all over the place. It's a sad commentary. I can't tell you. At the Columbia, when I teach, that's what I do. but I'm told I was actually told by another professor that I'm a dinosaur. So I said, I guess I am, but that's what I was taught.
What
And I
about
felt that,
how do the kids react to what you teach?
well, by and large, the kids listen mainly because I've got the credentials, and I back up everything I say with actual examples. It used to be that one of the great things I did, and I still do, is get them to go and look at the same story from four different newspapers or from three different networks and see how it happens. And they're often surprised how varied the people are about the same story. Then the great one to do is to stage an incident in front of the class and ask them to write about it and see how people look at things differently.
Well, with that, we need to take a break. So this is Dan Perkins.
Don Mazzella.
We're the two guys from Verona. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. In this final segment, Don and Dan offer their predictions on what's going to happen in our world.
Well, Dan, I'm not going to offer a prediction, but I am going to take note of passing of one of the truly unsung heroes of American politics. Phyllis Schlafly died. She, if I read the obituary right, was 92. When she started almost 50 years ago, fighting the ERA, extolling conservative views, the media laughed at her. The media said many things about her, made her look like a crazy housewife, but she persevered. And what's happened is the conservative movement today owes a lot to her. And unfortunately, I think her passing will go little noted, though the New York Times gave her a biting obituary, again, negating the tremendous job she did do, getting Americans to look right instead of left. It's a sad commentary, and we wish her well. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about some economic news this morning and some news out of the Middle East and Russia. This morning, we have the Purchasing Managers Index. And it came out this morning, and it's usually an indicator of the direction of the economy. It came out, and it was expected to be around 55%. Anything above 50% shows a growing economy. Anything below 50% shows a contracting economy. And the report was expected to be 55%, which would be a pretty strong growing economy, and actually came out at 51%, surprising a lot of people. The spin-off of that is the question, okay, so when we had the jobs number on Friday, the government market dropped to 25% chance of a Fed increase in interest rates in December. My guess is, given the Purchasing Managers Index of this morning, that may have moved from December to probably February of next year. It's signs that the economy is weakening. Now, I want to go back to the jobs number, which came out last Friday. The department of the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out all kinds of numbers around that, and the ones that are the most famous are the unemployment rate, which is 4.9, which was unchanged from the previous month. The employee participation rate, which is what percentage of the available workforce is working, was still around 62.5, 62.3. The number of new jobs was 151,000. The market was looking for 180 to 225, so it was a miss. But there's a statistic that I shared with you that I thought was one worth talking about. Right now, there are 12 million manufacturing jobs in the United States. There are 22 million state, city, county, and federal employees. So there are 10 million more government employees than there are manufacturing in jobs in the United States. 22 million versus 12. 10 million more. The number of people who are unemployed, run out of unemployment benefits, and not looking for work is about 94.5 million. But there was one little piece of information that I know has been there forever, and for some reason last Friday it caught my attention and caused me to do a lot of research. The definition of the number of people working or employed doesn't mean that all of them are getting paid. In fact, there's a category called working but not paid. I don't know how you work and not get paid, but the government's got a category. I did a tremendous amount of research, hours, couldn't find anything. I went to the Government Bureau of Labor Statistics, couldn't find anything, finally called them, got an answering machine. The lady called me back, and I said, I'm trying to figure out how to quantify that number of working or employed but not paid. And she said, well, we don't publish that. So I said, do you have it? She said, well, sort of. And I said, what do you mean sort of? She says, well, if you go to this particular section, you can find the number of people that are working, and then you can go to another section and you can find the number of people who are paid, and you just subtract one from the other. That'll tell you how many people who are employed but not paid. So I worked it out. I sent it back to her to verify my numbers, and she said I was correct. Out of the 145 million people that the government says are employed, 8.6 million of them are employed but not paid. That's 6.5% of the workforce. 6.5%. So 6.5% on any given month are employed but are not getting paid. So why are we counting them as employed? She said because they have the potential to be paid. Well, we've got 94 million people that have the potential to be paid if we just got them a job and paid for it. It was frustrating to me to have to go through all of that machinations, why they just can't deal with that. But it's another number. It's 6.5% of the people who are, quote, in the employed number. 6.5% of those people are employed, but they're not getting paid. It just seems strange to me that we have a category of employed but not paid, but they're not unemployed. The other category, did you want to say something?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm letting you talk because you're so interesting. Keep going. We only got a minute and a half.
I know. I can see the clock. The other thing was that this morning, Saudi Arabia and Russia have signed a deal, or purportedly signed a deal in advance of this energy summit later this month, to try and begin to stabilize the production of crude oil. Your old favorite subject, Venezuela, they were chasing the president down the street last weekend, and he escaped just barely. And they've turned over the distribution of food to the military as opposed to the government now. And so it's a situation where we're hopefully going to see some stability in production and ultimately some potential for increasing in prices. So whether that's going to happen or not, the Russians are always the wild card. So are the Saudis. And whether they can convince the rest of the people, including the country of Iran, to go into production controls is another story. So I think we're out of time. Mr. Mazzella, it's your turn.
This is Don Mazzella, and I hope to see you next week when we'll have some more information that you really need.
This is Dan Perkins for Two Guys from Verona. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Two Guys from Verona.